The median fee rate across the Lightning Network, just for routing fees, that is 0.003%. It's going to be commerce at the end of the day that really drives the yields and the network growth. As a whole, Magma operates runs about 77% of the market share for liquidity marketplaces. Magma has been demand constrained. So what we really need are the people that are buying the Lightning channels to support the overall yield numbers for the network. This will make it so that they don't need to manage channels at all anymore. And we've got different ways of actually managing your node. Kevin, we've got so much interest in actually deploying Bitcoin on the Lightning Network and earning non-custodial yield. Any rational actor would actually want to take their cold storage Bitcoin and earn 1.6% yield on it, and maybe even higher if those yield numbers go up.
Jesse Shrader is the CEO of Amboss, a data analytics company built for the Lightning Network that also offers a marketplace for anyone to buy and sell Lightning channels. In our conversation, we explored the state of adoption for Amboss's Magma marketplace to date. We talked about how their new product, Hydro, aims to help both merchants and those seeking yields on their Lightning liquidity. And then we talked about the Lightning Network and the structure of it in the context of other transportation networks. If you enjoy this episode and if you learn something new, the best way you can show your support for this show is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network. You can use any podcasting 2.0 app to do that. There are dozens of them out there, but my favorite one to use is Fountain. Before we get into today's show, just a quick message from our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Stackwork. And Stackwork is a Lightning-powered transcription tool that takes the best of AIs and humans to create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. We'll have more from Voltage and Stackwork later in the show. Jesse, welcome back to the show. It has been a long time since you've been on. I believe you were episode 20, 21, 22. I think that was the spring of the year 2022. And so maybe to start things off, just give a brief introduction of yourself for all the new listeners who didn't hear that episode. And then we can start with all the cool things you've built in the last year. Talk me through those.
Yeah, so I'm Jesse Shrader and CEO and co-founder for Amboss Technologies. And we're most known for Amboss.space, which provides some really awesome data and data visualizations about the Lightning Network. One of the prominent features is a search bar where you can search for any node on the network, and that helps you decide whether you want to connect to them or what fees to set, or just look at the market overall. And we also operate a marketplace. So Amboss Technologies is a small team. We are currently a team of 7, and we're building on the Lightning Network, helping it mature as a network.
Very cool. Now, I think when we last spoke, it was right before you launched this marketplace called Magma. Can you talk about the progress and adoption that you've seen? And actually, maybe for those who haven't tried it, what is Magma? Talk a bit about how it works. And then the last year, what kind of progress have you seen?
Yeah. So Magma is a marketplace for buying and selling Lightning channels. So if you operate a business, for example, and you want to receive payments, you actually need other nodes on the network to change, to allocate some Bitcoin towards your business. That's generally the way that payments flow, and those two need to match up. So other people on the network need to point Bitcoin towards your node, and that helps you receive payments. But without that, your business can't actually receive payments on this decentralized payment network. So it's a coordination tool, and it makes it so that businesses, instead of paying their Visa transaction bill, can actually pay other users on the Lightning Network and get them to create the payment infrastructure that enables them to receive low-cost payments.
Now, right now, I'm looking at Amboss numbers, and it looks like about 3.3% is the average APR for folks who are using Magma and supplying liquidity. So I just want to make sure I understand the 3.3% number and the nuances around it. Is that the income that the average node operator has received for supplying liquidity after all the fees associated with that?
It's not. It's actually the other side of the market. So when a business is looking to buy liquidity on an annualized basis, that is what they will be paying. So the actual yield number that a node operator would get, that is like what their take home pay is after a channel open cost and in the future a channel close cost. So and helping to like dive into the nuance there, because this is a market, so it has two sides. So on the one side, the buyers, those are the ones, the folks that are buying liquidity and buying Lightning channels, they'll be paying an APR, so an annual percentage rate. Whereas on the other side of the market, for the channel sellers, they'll be most interested in like the annual percentage yield. Now, like with those two things, there's also a whole bunch of different complexities. So there's the duration of this contract of this vehicle, and then there's also the size of Lightning channels that folks could purchase. So because there's all these different changes, we created Liner, which really helps make it so it's one number. And so with the Liner number, you can actually have an idea of what is the cost to get this liquidity, so I can receive payments on a weighted average basis. And then what is also the yield that takes into account these channel open and channel close costs.
I see. So what is that Liner number today or over the last year, let's say?
Looking at the market for this month, the actual cost that people are paying is about 2.39% on an annualized basis. And then on the yield side, the node operators are earning 1.6% yield on an annualized basis.
Got it.
And
so that 1.6 is after factoring in all the channel opening and channel closing costs.
That's right. Because the channel close costs happens in the future, what we do is we make a conservative guess. We say that the channel close cost in the future will be the same cost as the channel open. So it's basically just double that channel open cost, and that will be the entire cost for this channel.
I see. And so, okay, so you're basically saying to merchants or anyone who wants to accept Lightning payments, come here, get some inbound liquidity. It's going to cost about 2.3%. And then you're saying to the other side of the market, hey, anyone with some extra sats, if you want to direct that liquidity to someone else, you can earn 1.6%. Now, between those two, what is the balance that you've been seeing in that market? Are you seeing a lot more people willing to part with their sats, or are you seeing a lot more merchants looking for liquidity?
Yeah. Well, like adding a little nuance here, no one has to part with any sats. So that's the nice part about this whole thing being non-custodial. But as a market, Magma has been demand constrained. So what we really need are the people that are buying the Lightning channels to support the overall yield numbers for the network. And what we've seen so far is the real buyers haven't quite materialized just yet. And one of the things we've been learning is channel management is simply too difficult for people. And if you think about businesses and what they need, Well, like their most precious resource is time. And so they can't be spending the time to be managing channels and making individual purchases of liquidity. It simply doesn't make sense for them. And so we've put a lot of work into trying to understand the business customer and what it is that they need in order to really bootstrap this network and help the marketplace mature.
I see. And so if this marketplace matures and you start to see more people buying liquidity, uh, you're expecting then that yield to go up, correct?
I would, yeah.
And so how does that compare if we look at is it fair to compare this to the fiat kind of payment systems where a merchant for accepting a payment might end up paying 3, 4, 5, 6, 10%, depending on the size of the transaction and the tools they're using? Is it fair to then compare and say, okay, here's the Magma numbers. This is the difference between accepting payments on Lightning and accepting payments on credit card rails?
Yeah, so the intention with the liner cost numbers is that you could actually directly compare that to the Visa and MasterCard fees that a merchant would normally be paying, since as they'll be bootstrapping this network. One additional nuance to this is this liner cost, like when people are buying channels, that's like the initial case, and it's also the worst case scenario for needing to buy liquidity for every single purchase that customers make at your store. What changes is once those businesses start paying out Lightning to maybe other businesses or their suppliers or their employees, that the fee that is being paid drops from the 2.39% that we see this month down to what I would predict at the median fee rate across the Lightning Network just for routing fees. That is 0.003%. So it goes to basically nothing. So this is like liner cost is worst case scenario, but as we build a circular economy on the Lightning Network, the cost of commerce is essentially nil.
That's very helpful. So worst case scenario is 2.39. If you're a new business, you have no contacts, you have no other way of getting funds, getting anyone to connect to your node. And then as you either pay out or as other people recognize you have a valuable business and they want to connect to you, you're either paying nothing for those connections or you're paying routing fees for sloshing funds back and forth between channels.
Exactly. So with that, like what we see is like as with any like decentralized network, like what people suffer with is like discoverability. And if you're a big name on the Lightning Network, you can essentially get channels open to your node for free, just because people like what you're doing and they want to be part of the payment rails that could support whatever it is that you do. For the people that haven't developed a real name yet, and or maybe that on-chain fees are high, those are the folks that actually need to buy Lightning channels. And for that, up until recently, they'll be buying those channels from Magma to fill that gap.
Right. Do you have a sense for what that average payment fee is in the fiat world? I know there's been in the news Visa and MasterCard raising rates on their payment terminals and things like that. But I don't know what the actual average number is because I know there's a fixed component and a variable component. The number that's often quoted is like 2.9% plus 30 cents, which of course requires you to know what the average payment amount is to back into a fee. So just to give listeners context here, because I think this is important, routing fees are 0.03%. So that's at the very low end of your Lightning payments. Like if you have all the inbound liquidity in the world, you're able to basically process payments for 0.03%. And if you don't have any, you're looking at 2.39% today. What are you looking at if you're taking that credit card approach? Do you have a rough number for that?
Yeah, so it's difficult to like speak about a market as a whole, and it will differ country by country, and also like who the issuer of the card is, where is it going to. Credit cards, for example, they love to offer cash back. Well, like in order for them to offer cash back for spending funds, what they do is they generally charge the merchant more. So they may pay like 4%, 4% is pretty standard. And as you noted, Visa prices are going up. So like just that as a benchmark, it's pretty steep. If you're looking at remittance flows, that's where you'll see numbers as high as like 7%. Um, and you're also right that it depends on payment size. So generally, for any transaction, it will be at least 10 cents per transaction, and then a percentage fee on top. So that's just looking at like interchange and swipe fees.
Mm-hmm. And so we're clearly seeing then that the fiat number is ticking up with Visa's move to raise payment processing fees. You mentioned that the liner number for merchants is also probably ticking up. What will that? What do you think that routing fee number does over time? That 0.03% for routing the average payment on the Lightning Network. Does that go up over time, or how do these things kind of? What's the equilibrium point here?
Yeah. So like right now, 0.003% is like the median routing fee. And
Oh, zero point zero
when
zero
the
three.
so yeah, missing a zero, so it's essentially nothing. So okay, but for a payment to travel, it's going to make maybe 4 hops. Okay, so we multiply that by 4, we do the 0.012%. Okay, so if the network becomes more complex, maybe there are some more hops. Um, One thing to keep in mind is this routing fee. If you're not like actually buying and selling the channels, you're hoping that the routing fee is going to pay for both the channel open and the channel close costs. So there's a lot of calculus to do when you're just running a routing node, and you might think about a model just to what do I need to charge in order to recover my costs. And I think in order to recover costs, for the most part, like you should be charging maybe 0.3%. Um, so that would give you like plenty of room to work with for the most part. So some of those numbers may help you like get closer to running a profitable node. One thing to keep in mind though is uh, the market is completely open. So we see a massive amount of competition for routing fees, and one of the key offerings that we do is we provide a chart to show what the other competitors or fellow node operators are charging to route to a destination, and so you can actually place yourself in this market where a destination, a pure destination like the Lightning Loop node, you know that that is where people might be paying as much as 1% to actually make payments for that, which is like an extreme case. For the rest of the Lightning Network, fees are far lower.
Hmm. That's really interesting. There's so many variables here to consider. It's sometimes just mind-boggling to think about how this might evolve. And I guess the answer here is probably that no one really knows. But it's interesting to see what all those levers are, and how raising one or lowering another can modify the flow of funds across the Lightning Network. One other thing I want to touch on before we get into Magma specifically, I want to get your sense for the health of the Lightning Network. And maybe the best way to do that is because Amboss is full of all sorts of metrics, all sorts of dashboards, all sorts of tools you can use to figure out how to position yourself on the network. What is your preferred metric for assessing the health of the Lightning Network?
Yeah. My favorite to look at is simply the number of public nodes on the network. Those are, for the most part, like fully validating nodes that have self-sovereign setups. So these are the ones that will be, pretty unstoppable. There's no one that can really shut them down. So if you're looking at um, like censorship-resistant money and a censorship-resistant payment system, uh, that tells me that there are this many participants all around the world. So we're just shy of 18,000 nodes on the network, which is overall a great sign for the health and the decentralization of a new payment network.
Yeah. And most of these nodes, I imagine, are these mostly still Raspberry Pi node operators using things like Umbrel? Does I don't believe this includes mobile device nodes, things like Breeze and Phoenix. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the most part, the mobile users, if you want to run a full node on there, think about how many times your phone loses signal, or yeah, it gets turned off, and that's a difficulty for node operators. So when in the mobile environment, a lot of the solutions are to make it private channels to private nodes. So you won't even see the mobile users on the network. You'll really only see the public ones that are always online.
Got it. And so, with this 18,000 number, uh, I don't remember what it was when we first spoke, but it probably was somewhere in the range of 16 to 18, maybe even 20,000, somewhere. It hasn't changed a whole lot in the last year.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? And what is Amboss doing to kind of grow that number? Because I imagine at the end of the day, the growth of that number is really important to Amboss's business.
Yeah, it's a metric of like complexity, and like one of the key theses for Amboss is to provide data analytics to help with complex decision making. So as the network becomes more complex, that's a tailwind for Amboss to be able to help users navigate this incredibly complex payment network, keep track of the market, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but one of the reasons that I think growth has slowed is there's not a huge yield market to support the development of this network quite yet. Um, Also, and part of the reason that we believe that the node amount hasn't grown is because the user experience is too difficult. I mean, it's going to be commerce at the end of the day that really drives the yields and the network growth. So we need to see payment volumes. And when folks were just getting started and figuring things out, a lot of them were simply rebalancing channels. Like these are circular payments that really don't go anywhere, which is basically just pay your peers for sloshing payments around, which might be good for privacy, but like that isn't an economy. Um, for an economy to
Mm-hmm.
happen, like you need the consumers, you need the merchants, um, yeah, and create this circular payment system.
Do you have any information on the stickiness of the Lightning Network? Like, if someone does set up a node, what is the likelihood that they are still running that node, let's say 6 or 12 months into the future? Do you have any understanding of like what that churn rate is? Because maybe I'm not sure, but maybe there is some component of churn in keeping that 18,000 node number relatively constant.
That's a great question and one we don't yet have an answer to. Um, Our focus has been on actually doing snapshots of the Lightning Network, so we can go back later and do the data analysis. In order to get those numbers, you really have to like first record it, and then you can go back later and take a look and find out these important numbers for the future growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's get into Magma. We touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but since your launch in, I believe, April 2022, I've been following pretty closely the numbers, the amount of volume going through Magma. It seems to be roughly 5 to 10 Bitcoin of liquidity that is being supplied every month.
Mhm.
How does that compare to the rest of the other Lightning liquidity marketplaces that are available?
Yeah. So as far as like other marketplaces go, there's Lightning Labs Pool product, which is really a marvel of engineering. So they have a blind auction that is kind of leveraging the like a recent Nobel Prize win for finding better pricing in auctions. So it's a cool system. Um, However, like my impression is that it's a bit complex for users. So we tried to take a very simple approach with Magma, something that you can just use a web browser to access and buy liquidity, make Lightning payments. Yeah, click buy, pay, and you're done. So this is a much easier flow. Um, and then Pool has also like made another improvement, which allows like individual buys. And yeah, I think they've been growing in liquidity that they've been processing, but as a whole, Magma operates or yeah runs about 77% of the market share for liquidity marketplaces. One thing that's
Wow.
kind of in the back there is uh, one dual funded channels and liquidity ads, and those two go together. So this is at the protocol level. There is a marketplace that can do this. However, there's no information on what actually gets settled. There's only advertisements. So it's great for privacy, but horrible for generating any type of metric about how much has gone through.
Hmm. So, okay, so 77% of the market share for Lightning liquidity, with the exception of these protocol level tools that you can't really assess, that is
Yeah.
going through Magma today. How do you
Yeah.
expect that to change over time? Do you expect this to be like a winner take most market where once you've built a marketplace with a critical mass of users, you now have like a strong moat to protect that business? Or do you think over time this gets competed down to, everyone having 2 or 3% and many different competitors?
Um, let's see. It might not be too important to really focus on controlling market share, since we are so early. And I think the major focus should be on what we call it like growing the pie. So this is just Lightning Network adoption, because like even if we're fighting over market share, that won't really move the entire industry forward. So the real focus is on improving the user experience, and actually getting people to use Lightning, be able to easily get liquidity, and those will be the real drivers. And then we can fight over market share. But it's kind of pointless at this point. So we've got both cooperation and competition on that front.
Yeah, that's fair. So instead of competing over the 5 to 10 Bitcoin every month, the goal is let's take that to 50 to 100 Bitcoin, or 500 to 1,000 or more. What are you doing now to fix some of the problems that you've discovered with Magma? Kind of to balance the marketplace out, because you mentioned there's kind of like this lack of buyers. How do you fix that?
Yeah. So because Magma as a marketplace is demand constrained, what we've done with our latest release, which is called Hydro, which allows merchants, especially specifically businesses, to be able to automate the purchases of liquidity. So this will make it so that they don't need to manage channels at all anymore. And we've got different ways of actually managing your node. Some are more privacy preserving than others. For businesses, like they may want to be more transparent with their activities, and so the privacy features aren't so critical, because at the end of the day, they may have to be opening their books to investors, etc., or going through an audit. So for them, like if you want to be super privacy preserving, we could just use public information and say, I want my node capacity to be 3 Bitcoin. Okay, so we can go out to the market and pull from Magma automatically and buy channels so that your node can actually reach that 3 Bitcoin target. So it's a very elegant solution, in our opinion, that merchants and businesses can just prepay for this service, and kind of like top off their balance to ensure that their business can continue to operate, can continue to receive payments. If you want even more fine-grained control and a more cost-effective solution, what you can do is enable what we call balance pushes to Amboss. And so that reports how much inbound liquidity your node has as a business. And so based on that information, we can identify more acutely that you may have a payment issue on receiving payments, and you never want that to be disrupted. So based on your inbound liquidity, we'll get you exactly where you need. So maybe you need to maintain at all times 1 Bitcoin of inbound liquidity. So say, for example, if you are selling airline tickets or hotel reservations, these are large payments that should be going through the Lightning Network. But in order to actually get that liquidity ahead of time and do continual monitoring of your node, like you're going to need to start to source a whole bunch of Bitcoin pointed to your node so that you can process those payments and your customers have a great experience when they go to pay and reserve their trip, get a hotel reservation, get their airline tickets, what have you. And sometimes that involves pulling a lot from the marketplace. So with that additional pull, that additional demand for liquidity, we should see much higher yields in the marketplace, and will make it far more rewarding to run a Lightning node.
That is very clever. So you have now this funnel, this like consistent funnel of anyone who needs liquidity, that's just automatically being sent to Magma. And of course, there's already a large contingent of people on the other side of that market that are willing to, pay and give someone inbound liquidity.
Kevin, we've got so much interest in actually deploying Bitcoin on the Lightning Network and earning non-custodial yield. Any rational actor would actually want to take their cold storage Bitcoin and earn 1.6% yield on it, and maybe even higher if those yield numbers go up. Now, this is just for the initial bootstrap, but we've got a real opportunity as the business environment grows in the Lightning Network before there is a full circular economy where node operators, hedge funds can actually start deploying Bitcoin in the Lightning Network. And the incentives will be that they will want to get more businesses to receive payments over the Lightning Network.
Wow. Yeah. So all of a sudden, if you've deployed your Bitcoin and use it now to fund inbound liquidity for other nodes, you want as many people accepting Lightning payments as possible.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
It's the alignment of incentives that excites me the most, because now we have investors, the Wall Streeters, that want to push hyper Bitcoinization. They want a full circular economy, and that is like completely motivated by greed, that they will want to maximize yields and
Wow.
also minimize their risk. So this becomes like a very competitive, investable asset for these large institutions that want to start playing the Bitcoin game and the Lightning game, but the yields aren't quite there yet. It's too small, but the incentives are there to really blow this up.
Yeah, you're blowing my mind right now. I mean, it's just really cool to see this potential flywheel here where uh, if I have a ton of Bitcoin and I want to deploy it all, I have now a really strong incentive. Like my yield depends on more people on the Lightning Network. It's like now you have all these people who hold Bitcoin are now Lightning Network salespeople, essentially, onboarding as many people as fast as they can. I don't know if you're allowed to speak to any of the folks you talked to about this idea, but what's the scale of the interest of the people who are waiting on the sidelines, ready to deploy capital? Like you mentioned, hedge funds. Is this are these like multi-billion-dollar asset managers, or are they how much further do we have to grow before they get interested? I guess.
My sense is that the interest is there. I wrote an article called "Forget About the Bitcoin ETF. Let's Start a Lightning Fund," and that article generated a lot of interest. And I got a couple of inbound questions about actually starting a Lightning ETF of sorts. So this would be a really disruptive vehicle to like really kind of mature the Lightning Network and the Lightning Network markets and ecosystem. So it's very exciting. It's still very early days. Um, like I said, the market is very small, but and this fund would likely need to stay quite small. But it's like yet another tool in the tool belt for making Bitcoin a very investable asset.
And so a Lightning ETF, would that essentially be either Amboss or someone else controlling a bunch of Bitcoin that people send in, and that Bitcoin being used on the Lightning Network and funding inbound liquidity for other nodes, correct? And then whatever yield is generated is split among the folks who have supplied the Bitcoin?
For example, that's one way that it could work. For us, as a small team, like we may not be able to take on all of that, at least quite yet. And for us, it's far more strategic for us to remain purely working on the data and staying at a neutral place in the Lightning Network. Of course, we want to see Lightning Network grow, but if we start getting involved in the marketplace ourselves or starting up an LSP, it may take away our ability to serve the LSPs or the different node operators that make the Lightning Network great. So, in order to keep our incentives in line, we're not looking at moving into those markets.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage empowers engineers to integrate Bitcoin and Lightning Network payments into their business stack with an enterprise-grade experience. The team at Voltage is building the complete toolset so that you can do more than simply spin up nodes, but also understand and interpret your node's data. Their new product Surge gives engineers the capability to quickly solve problems and optimize operations. With node insights and visibility through time series data, you get dynamic and complex insights never available before. You can get complete control with insanely fast onboarding, advanced client-side encryption, and zero management infrastructure, making backups, networking, and upgrades simple. Get a free 7-day trial today at voltage.cloud. Okay, I want to make sure I understand Hydro correctly. So you mentioned there's two different kind of forms that someone could take on Hydro. Is one is Amboss could be monitoring the node capacity, which everyone can kind of already see. And that is if you're more privacy minded and you're not interested in sharing exact balances with Amboss. And then the other one is a fine grained, I want this much exactly in inbound capacity at all times. Here, Amboss have the data. make sure my balance never goes below this amount. Is that kind of correct there?
Yeah. So that is like really the way to go if your business, for example, needs to go through an audit or you need different accounting tools. There's other services we can like supply on top of this data. But for example, if you really want to be cost effective with your purchases and make sure that you're not buying more liquidity than you actually need, it will be a lot cheaper if you actually share some information. One concept that we've discussed is the price of anarchy. And so that is the price of anarchy is this idea that if you share information like with others and you're not selfish about it, then you actually can create a more efficient solution. So like the quintessential example is like how do you drive from point A to point B? um, if you use Google Maps, which is fueled by a whole bunch of drivers that are actually making this route and can report on traffic information, if you use Google Maps, now you can access that and avoid a traffic jam and get to your destination faster. Whereas if you're just using, your Thomas guide or whatever, like a paper map, uh, the likelihood is that you won't be able to get to your destination as fast as the people that have a data fueled journey.
Wow, yeah, that's interesting. So if we look at this as a spectrum here and think about this road analogy you just used, the paper map example I think is kind of in the middle, because there's another end to the spectrum where you just kind of hop in your car and just roll down your window and start asking strangers for directions. And so if we take that as the extreme on the one end, where you have no data and you have to manually pull it from strangers as you drive by them, you have the middle where you have a paper map but it does not update in real time. There is no traffic flow data and it may be out of date. And then at the end, you have Google Maps where it's pretty much real time. You're getting millions of people contributing near real time data to make sure that you get there as fast as possible. Where are we at in the Lightning Network? Like, where do you put the average node operator in that spectrum?
That's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up because sometimes we don't even know where the destination is on the Lightning Network. With an invoice, you get this public key, but maybe your node doesn't even see this public key. So you need better gossip. Like that's basically how the Lightning Network operates, simply based on gossip. Like I heard this node is over here. So using information like that is kind of like the basics. There's also been developments from L&D for the most part, and also like Rene Picard about kind of like these Picard payments, which uses kind of guesses about the probability of like making a successful payment and doing some of the pathfinding. There's also like pure math approaches, like what's called a Dijkstra's algorithm, which finds the shortest path in a graph, like from point A to point B. So simply by reducing the amount of like nodes that you have to go through, like that's one way to think about it. So it's almost like we've got kind of a basic map. Not all the cities are populated, um, and we're trying to find the best way to get to the destination.
Interesting. Okay, so now I have to ask this because your comments about Google and the mapping data that they collect, I think will raise a lot of privacy concerns, especially among Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your view on, how does Amboss collect the data that you collect? How do you make sure that the outcome is not exploiting this data for, for in the case of Google, their advertising engine?
Yeah. So uh, let's see. So when we first launched this like channel balance sharing feature, there were a lot of concerns, and so we listened to those concerns, and it was pointed out to us that we don't want to be at subpoena risk for actually knowing how payments flow. like one of the key components of the Lightning Network is that you have payments level privacy. And if you have, channel balances over a period of time, it's possible that you could actually figure out how a payment flowed. Now, we made a specific design choice after hearing those concerns to actually delete all of the raw balance data after 1 hour. So we have nothing that could actually show that how a payment flowed through the Lightning Network. And in so doing, we're maintaining payment level privacy, but also having a great view of what is the current state of the Lightning Network. And so that is one of those pieces that can inform the up-to-date routing information without disrupting payment level privacy.
I see. Now, because there's a lot of people in the Lightning community that believe like the Lightning Network is going to be the private payments tool, and I think a lot of people work really hard to preserve that privacy. But as you mentioned, this is kind of a choice you guys made. My question now is like whether or not the Lightning Network itself at a protocol level needs improvements to make sure that payment level privacy is preserved. Because if you did not want to make this choice to delete all this data, or if someone else came along and said, I'm going to build an Amboss competitor and I'm not going to delete all this data, that in theory would compromise some level of payment privacy. So does the Lightning Network protocol itself need to see more privacy improvements for users to be able to expect payment level privacy preservation going forward?
It's a good question. And like what the default is on the Lightning Network is that you do have privacy. Now, like one key definition of privacy is the ability to selectively disclose. So users are electing to attest, and this isn't a proof. It's an important distinction, is that I say that I have these balances, but they could lie. So we're dealing with this information and providing services based on the information that's provided, which is a simple attestation. It's a signed attestation, but we don't really know. One way to like actually find channel balances, like the other way, is through payments probing. So this is attempting a payment. Now, like in our view, like that is dealing with less consent than like actually asking the user or allowing them to share information with us. So like this is there's different ways to approach this problem of like what is the state of the Lightning Network from a pathfinding perspective. And so like of course there could be other companies that come out and say, yeah, I'll take in all this data and I'll never delete it. Well, like we do have like some protections when it comes to like GDPR, this like right to be forgotten. But overall, for the most part, like we're just interested in what is the current state of the Lightning Network, and like for the information that we don't need, like let's get rid of that because it is sensitive, and we don't want to disrupt privacy. And like because we've made those decisions, and also have like great services to offer, like that will continue to incentivize users to like push us data as responsible data stewards, and also providing really high levels of service based on the data provided.
I see. So you mentioned probing. Is this something that you think is actively happening? Are other participants like Chain Analysis and some of these other companies that typically check blockchain data, are they doing this probing actively? Do you have any idea if they're coming up with meaningful results? And is that an avenue that Lightning Network users should be concerned about as it pertains to their privacy?
I think things on the Lightning Network will definitely change on like whether they're okay with probing, and maybe actually charging for a payment attempt is one way. Now, this has like massive protocol implications that even for attempting something, you're going to have to pay. So it's a bit weird, but I can see it happening, and this may be one way to like prevent against griefing attacks and other things. Um, but it's a difficult trade off. So that's one way to go about that problem. Overall, there are other companies that actively probe the Lightning Network. They do it all the time just to like find out this network state. However, our thinking is that simply doesn't scale. If you want more participation in the Lightning Network, that's going to mean more nodes. It's going to mean more channels, and at some point, you're not going to have enough Bitcoin in order to probe the entire network and have good, like granular data about what is the state of things.
Yeah, because that scales exponentially, right? As the network grows larger, there's now like exponentially more channels that a payment could go through, and quickly becomes unattainable.
Yeah.
On the topic of asking someone to pay to probe, you're saying essentially that if I have a node and I'm worried that people are going to start probing my node and figuring out what my balances are, I could, this would probably require a change to Lightning protocol. But if that were the case, I could say, hey, anyone who wants to attempt a payment, you got to pay me 10 sats. If you do, then you can go ahead and make a fake payment, make a real payment. I don't care. Um, is there a future in which Amboss does the same thing for the attestation piece, where I could say I will willingly supply my balance data to Amboss in exchange for a certain number of sats?
Yeah, and we actually see Lightning Network Plus do like a Sats for Stats type of situation where he's actually paying the users to like give him statistics from their node, and it is self-attested, and so he's going to have like Ellen Node Insight is going to have like some questions about whether that data is real or not. It kind of comes down to trust. Now, like we're in an interesting position because like if one node on one end of the channel is attesting my channel has this balance, but then the node on the other end like attests to a different balance, well, now we have conflict. However, if both of them agree, and they're attesting to the same information, now for the first time ever we have validation, which like these validated balances, this provides a really important step forward for the auditability and proof of reserves for Lightning.
Mm. And is this auditability, do you think, a constraint right now on Lightning's growth? Like, are large enterprises, sitting on the sidelines saying, "I would offer Lightning payments, but I can't tell where any of this money is flowing, and that's a headache from a legal standpoint. So I'm just not going to get involved."
It could be. I don't know that anyone has really turned away from the Lightning Network because of this auditability reason. However, I see it as essential for the Lightning Network to mature, because what we're seeing is Lightning startups and Lightning businesses, they are getting to stages where they may have to face an audit at some point. And like the question for them is like, how are you going to generate a bank statement for your Lightning node? Like the only people that know your balances is you, and you're the one providing the information to the auditor. And like a savvy auditor has professional skepticism is what they like to call it, which is like, okay, yeah, I trust you, but can you prove it? Um, and that's where they're going to run into issues. And an auditor may not want to put their reputation on the line when people are to actually sign off and say that a business is completely honest with their financials and that everything matches up.
Right. Who's building the auditor tool for Lightning. Is this something Amboss could eventually provide for folks, or is anyone else doing this?
This is well, one of the services we're providing is just like historical views of your node and channel balances. So like what state is your node in? Is it all local balance? Is it all remote? How much do you have on chain at what point in time? So being able to store like that information presented while also like deleting all the raw balance information is pretty critical. So we would have the ability to support an accountant that is working with a business that may deal with the individual transactions, and then we'll have the data to back it up with the validations to show that this all matches up between the individual transactions and what the business needs in order to pass an audit.
I see. That makes sense. I want to talk about another interesting component of Amboss that I think was released recently is Ambucks. And this is, I guess, came out in the last couple of months, and I believe it is a prepaid kind of credit for Amboss services. I'd love to know more about why you guys chose to introduce Ambucks rather than, sticking with the native currency of Sats.
Yeah, this is purely a user experience upgrade. I know, like when we released it or announced it, it was not received well at all. I think there was a lot of concern that we've introduced a new like crypto token or any of that. But the reality is that these are prepaid credits, just like any other business, like basically a gift card, and it reduces the amount of touch points that a user will have to go through when they want to buy a channel on Magma. And so this was a critical feature for us to release Hydro. And so that means that the entire liquidity sourcing and liquidity provisioning can all be automated, and a user doesn't need to like pay invoices throughout the day at weird hours of the night, like when we're going out and sourcing liquidity for their node. So really, it's just simply a user experience upgrade.
Oh, I see. So this was like the foundation before you could build Hydro. You needed that tool to allow anyone to set an amount of funds uh, in Amboss's control, and so Amboss can pull those funds at any moment.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is
Got it.
like now we know a little bit better that like maybe we shouldn't do intermediate announcements of like little incremental features, but really the whole feature is Hydro, so you could fully automate liquidity. But in order to do that, we need the prepaid credits.
Do you think we'll see other teams and products in the Lightning ecosystem adopt a similar approach? Because right now it seems like most Lightning apps, there are exceptions because I know Thunder Games for a while was doing tickets. I know Slice does something called slices. They're abstractions on value to some degree. But most of the Lightning apps I've seen use Sats natively. Is that something you think is going to change over time, where everyone is going to kind of converge on a proprietary, whatever you want to call it, prepaid credit or token or some abstraction on Sats that makes it easier to make payments on demand? Or do you think the UX on Lightning will just get so good that Sats will be the only thing we need?
It's a good question, and I think for the most part it comes down to regulatory. Like what can you do, what can't you do? And like for us, we would love to use Bitcoin all the time. However, we also want to cater to people that don't yet have Bitcoin and still want to run a Lightning node and receive Lightning payments. So we can accept credit cards, and they can buy Ambucks, and that allows us to, in some way, offer them services in the Bitcoin ecosystem without them having to, buy Bitcoin ahead of time.
I see. All right, I want to shift gears to an idea that I had recently, and this is, there's a lot of people in the Lightning space that love to use the analogy of Lightning Network and railways, and how a rail line may be similar to a Lightning channel, and a rail station kind of similar to a Lightning node. Well, I recently discovered in Canada where I live, there's a number of hotels, beautiful hotels, scattered across the country that are all about 100 years old, 120 years old. I dug into the history of one of them, and I discovered it was made by a rail line. And one of them is actually the most photographed hotel in the world. There's another one in my city, but there's a collection of maybe 20 of these incredibly beautiful old stone chateaus and hotels that were all built by rail lines. And I kind of connected the dots after the fact and went like, oh, in the late 1800s, when all these rail lines were kind of competing for market share, trying to teach people how to use rail lines and how to, travel the country and see new destinations, they may have used these hotels as an incentive. Say, here, come stay at this beautiful hotel. Just hop on our rail line and you're there. It's going to take you right to the hotel. And in many cases, that's where these hotels exist. They're literally across the street from rail lines. And so, but I found it interesting that it wasn't hotel companies that built these things. It was actually the rail line. And so if we continue this analogy of Lightning Network nodes and rail lines, what are some of the things, the additional services or the tools that we might see Lightning Network nodes build to incentivize people to route their sats through that particular node and not another one?
Yeah, I love this question. It makes me think, like, do you drive just for the love of driving, or do you drive to get to a destination? And I think, 99 times out of 100, like, you'll be driving to a destination. And like, when you're building payments infrastructure, like, where are the payments going? What are the key services and products that you can provide that will create the destination for payments? And I feel like businesses, once they understand like all of this infrastructure that can transport value at extremely low cost, like, what are the services that I can provide that will change the flow of payments to their node? I don't feel like it's far off, because we have incredible services like, BTC Pay Server, that can actually make your node a fully fledged destination of payments, and you can spin up a node or a whole store, a web store, in a matter of hours. This is like super exciting to me because it comes at nearly zero additional cost. And now you've created the hotel adjacent to the rail line that could actually support this, not only support yourself, your family, a business, but also support the payments infrastructure that flows to it.
Right. So in this case, then you're suggesting that the additional businesses and services that a node creates, that's the destination. Is there anything else that I'm thinking more of, like a routing node who maybe doesn't have an actual business outside of that? And maybe they're hoping that just by routing, they're going to be able to like build a business and become kind of a destination. Is that realistic then? Or do you think that routing node has to think about building an actual business as a reason for people to send payments through their node?
Yeah. In some conversations I've been having for the actual businesses that are serving customers, and you could call them like the Uncle Jims. So they are actually providing liquidity to individual node destinations. And like for the most part, these are private channels, and they're going to private nodes, one for each customer. So it's an interesting scenario where, like, as the business, they are going to have to provide all of the payment liquidity themselves. So that's not a very tenable solution as this scales. I mean, are they going to have enough Bitcoin to supply all of the needs for all of their customers as they grow? um, like for a lot of businesses, you're going to have to make, allocation decisions, like how much Bitcoin am I actually holding? Does this make sense long term? Do I need to like diversify to other things? I mean, it's like unthinkable to a lot of Bitcoiners, like just hold all your value in Bitcoin. But for businesses that need to like manage payroll, like they may have other like cash flow needs. So in that scenario, like there's an opportunity for routing nodes to say, like, hey, I can actually connect you to all of these different payment destinations, whether they're, and be able to like manage the fact that maybe they're online, offline, and provide some redundancy to actually reach these payment destinations. So that, like, the routing node may actually provide a way to reduce the capital requirements, and also reduce the risk of like maybe a node going offline, and you having some liquidity issue that results from that. Um, so
Interesting.
overall, I think there's a lot of like market opportunity for routing nodes to step up and say, like, I'll be opening the channel to service that need and help your business use case and help the network effect.
Right. Okay, now to continue this Lightning Network and railway analogy, one of the points of concern or one of the uncertainties here is what will that cost be to lay a rail line or to create a new Lightning channel? Right now, it's effectively free. It's like anyone can spin up hundreds, thousands even of channels. It's not like a rail line yet in that regard, where when one rail line was built connecting a city A to city B, that was kind of all that was necessary. It deterred a lot of other people from trying to do the same because it's a big capital expense up front, and there's already another path that exists. So we often see, single or double rail lines connecting cities, and not 60 different rail lines from 60 different companies. What is your thought on that component there of that analogy? Do you think we get to the point where we only need a few big channels between destination nodes on the network? Do you think it gets expensive enough to deter others from setting up the fourth or the fifth or the sixth channel between those two nodes? What? Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the number of channels on the network will progress over time and the cost associated with those.
Yeah, in transportation, you like we'll often hear talk about the last mile problem. So we've got different types of like transportation methods. So like from like country to country, we've got airlines. From like city to city, we have highways. From and from like within a city, we've got buses, and we've got like bus stops. But then even the last mile, I mean, people might be looking at the electric scooters to go from like the bus stop to their individual home and back. So like there's different types of nodes that service those different needs on the Lightning Network. They've got different channel sizes. So like maybe you don't need to build a whole highway to get to from your home to the bus stop. Like maybe you only need a small bike path. So like these are the different types of decisions that like node operators individually, like they'll do the calculus on this, and the large institutional capital allocators may be able to provide like broader connections between say exchanges and other like major service providers.
That's really interesting. So we may have different tiers of Lightning node operators, each with their own constraints on how much capital they have, how many channels they're willing to open up. And would that would then dictate where they decide to deploy capital on the network and their position, right? How close they are to other destinations that they think are relevant.
Yeah. There's a couple of like different like graph theory metrics that you can look at. Like one is centrality. And there's different types of centrality. There's like betweenness, like how often are you between point A and point B for like all of the nodes on the network. So a lot of people optimize for that score, but it doesn't really take into account how much capital you're allocating to all these, because not every node deserves a whole highway built to it. It doesn't really make sense. But then there's another metric that we've it's eigenvector centrality, but like we've just called it hubness. So like, okay, am I connected to an important node, and like how many important nodes are there, and like it's kind of like a connectivity like importance. So this is like one other like math based and graph theory based metric to like use to optimize your node. But then there's a whole nother case of like just looking, if we can look at payment reliability, is there a metric for payment reliability based on the structure of the network? And that's something that we're keenly interested in, because we want to make the Lightning Network have the highest reliability payments at the lowest cost. We want this to be a really high performance and sustainable payment network. And that's how we beat all the other payment processors. Like Visa and MasterCard can promise the 99.99% reliability, but I think Lightning Network may suffer like currently, but we've got a lot of work to do to move that forward. But we have the benefit of math to help us do that.
Yeah. Now, on the topic of payment reliability, the best number that I've come across was from River's September 2022 Lightning report. I believe they're coming out with a new one shortly. In that report, they said that through River's nodes, they had a 98.7% payment reliability. I don't know if you have access to, I imagine you have access to different data, and you can kind of maybe make a guess on your side. Have you seen reliability ticking up? Is 98.7 roughly indicative of payment success across the network, or is that number higher or lower in your view?
I could see that being the case for River as like a major name, and they have a keen focus on running a high performance Lightning node. For other parts of the network, I would really doubt that they are getting anywhere close to that type of payment reliability. All you need to do is go to a conference where they've got the beer tap and see how many payments fail just using that. You can see people using all sorts of different wallets and having to switch between wallets. Like, that's not a great user experience today, but we'd like to see that improve by an incredible amount to make this technology available to anyone and like any wallet.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Stackwork. Stackwork is a Lightning-powered platform for generating high-quality transcripts of all your audio or video content. They combine AI engines and hundreds of human workers all over the world who are paid over the Lightning Network to assemble these transcripts. And that's what lets Stackwork create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. To see the results for yourself, you can check out my personal website where I host transcripts for all my podcast episodes. If you want to learn more about Stackwork, visit stackwork.com. That is STAK work.com. All right, let's jump into some rapid fire questions to finish this off. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. First one, what is one book that you've recently read that has changed your view of the world?
one book that's changed my view of the world is Internet of Money. That was huge. Just like Andreas Antonopoulos helping me realize the potential of this network.
Yeah, I remember reading it as well. It's eye-opening stuff. Next question: if you could only hold one asset for the next decade, and it could not be Bitcoin, what asset would it be?
I guess gold. Yeah,
Fair
gold.
enough. If you could change one thing about the Lightning Network, what would you change?
Its ability to withstand griefing attacks. I think that's a major piece that could use a lot more attention. So shout out to Carla, that is working hard on this issue.
Shout out Carla. If you could give one piece of advice to the 18,000 Lightning node operators out there that are trying to see either more success through their more successful payments, or they're trying to earn more in routing fees, what is your advice?
Don't charge zero fees for routing. Actually, charge the right amount to actually keep you motivated to keep your node operating well. Don't charge zero.
Interesting. And I believe you said this at the beginning of the episode, but do you think that right amount is much higher than the current average of 0.003%, right?
Yeah. Charge at least 0.03%. If you've got 1 million sat channels, 0.03% would be the right amount if we're at 1 sat per byte. And whatever sat per byte the mempool is at, use that as a multiplier. So right now we're looking at 18, so 18 times that.
Interesting. That's a good rule of thumb. Okay, so 0.03 times whatever sat per vbyte the mempool is at, and that is probably going to get you towards a break-even state if you have a lot of other things optimized as well.
Yeah, and we're dividing by the capacity of the channel. So if you actually make the channel larger than 1 million sats, like you can charge much less.
I see.
But that should be the cost that's a cost recovery formula.
Right. Okay, final question for you. Who's one Bitcoin or Lightning builder that you'd like to give a shout out to for doing great work?
Yeah, I'll double down on Carla for helping to mitigate the griefing issues, and also doing some interesting work on reputation. In addition, I'll give a shout out to Alex Bosworth for doing some incredible thinking on Lightning. Sometimes it feels like he's reading our minds or our internal company chat, just with how forward thinking he is about the Lightning Network.
Awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time today. Where can folks go to learn more about you and Amboss?
They can check out our website at amboss.space, follow us on Twitter at amboss.tech, and then you can follow me on Twitter, Justifer_BTC.
Awesome. Thanks again for the time. Hope we can do it again soon.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Thanks.
In the last 30 days, you guys sent in 24,165 sats. That came in from 22 different supporters. Let's run through some of the last comments you guys have sent in over the last week or so. First, we have Cardboard Giraffe sent 110 sats and said, important work you're doing here, Kevin. Margie should check out Breeze. It's targeted at retailers with features like the ability to create SKU codes for items with a orange heart emoji. Thank you, Cardboard Giraffe. That was on Stacking Sats number 9 with Margie Ramos. MCOT said, River has a great business. Keep up the ethos, Alex. Cheers. It sent 378 sats. Thank you, MCOT. We have Michael Matulef sent in 500 sats and sent some lightning bolt emojis on episode 119, again with Alex Leishman. Blockchain Boog said, big fan of River, glad to see them have success. Keep building. If River ever goes public, I would buy shares, and sent 5,000 sats. Thank you, Blockchain Boog. I also got some clap emojis and 5,000 sats for episode 120 with Archer Brueggemann. And BTC Rich said, you have the best lightning focused show in all of Podland, and sent 500 sats. Big thank you, BTC Rich. That means a lot. And I can't wait to see what you guys send in this week.